This accident was nothing short of a nightmare. A diver trapped in the depths of an old, murky well in Le Crescenta. His safety rope tangled beyond repair as he struggled to catch a breath. However, what makes this tragedy all the more mind-boggling is that it happened to none other than Paul Francis Hayden himself. Buckle up and get ready to hear the unbelievable story of Paul Hayden. Meet Paul Francis Hayden, a highly trained member of the US Air Force's elite pararescue unit. Paul, now 39 years old, has braved some of the toughest conditions a person can bear, from diving into rough seas to rescuing fishermen in dire straits. He had done it all. Joining the Air Force's equivalent of the Navy SEALs in 1986, Hayden had earned a reputation as a careful and reserved instructor who placed the safety of his comrades above all else. His commanding officer, Colonel Kent Clark, couldn't understand what could have possibly gone wrong, as Hayden was not one to take unnecessary risks. Paul was not a thrill-seeker. He was extremely careful. He was always very conscientious about inspecting his equipment and took care of the people with him. I just can't figure out what went wrong. Goss Canyon is a hidden gem, known only to a select few and cherished by those lucky enough to stumble upon it. Nestled within the craggy granite walls at the top of the canyon lies an abandoned well, blown out of the mountainside back in 1907. It was this well that caught the eye of Hayden and his 6 siblings who grew up in Le Crescenta. The Hayden siblings quickly transformed the well into their very own summer oasis, using it as a spot to swim, dive, and explore the labyrinth of tunnels and caverns that reached hundreds of feet below the surface. For the Hayden siblings, this well was more than just a place to cool off during the scorching summer months. It was a world of adventure waiting to be discovered. The morning of September the 17th, 2000, found Air Force Master Sergeant Paul Hayden and his older brother Michael embarking on a journey deep into the rugged terrain of Goss Canyon. Laden with scuba gear, the brothers set out to explore the old horizontal water well that Paul had known so well since childhood. As a US Air Force pararescue instructor, Paul was determined to push the boundaries and explore further than he had ever done before, surpassing sumps that plunged hundreds of feet deep. Despite his years of experience, it's worth noting that Paul had never undergone any form of cave diving training or certification. Still, that didn't deter him from delving deeper into the well. With his brother by his side, Paul set out on what would be his most challenging dive in the well yet. After receiving permission from Mrs. Pruitt, the current owner of the well, the Hayden brothers unlocked the heavily fortified gate leading to the well. It's worth noting that Mrs. Pruitt had repeatedly cautioned against visitors due to liability concerns, recognizing the inherent dangers of exploring abandoned mines and wells. These sites pose a greater risk of collapse, as well as the potential presence of toxic gases and low oxygen levels, making it imperative to use atmospheric monitors during exploration. Despite these warnings, the Hayden brothers forged ahead with their plan. With no regard for the potential hazards that lay ahead, they stepped into the murky depths, determined to explore every nook and cranny. But little did they know, their journey would take a dark and tragic turn. Taking every possible safety precaution, the Hayden brothers tethered themselves together with a sturdy rope before embarking on their exploration of the well. With all their checks in place, they began their journey by crawling through the narrow 3 by 4 foot opening, equipped with air tanks and lights to guide their way. After crawling for about 50 meters through the tunnel, they descended down a slope, covering another 9 meters to reach a water-filled room. It was a moment of excitement and anticipation as they prepared to plunge deeper into the well, eager to uncover what lay ahead. Sensing the potential danger ahead, Michael decided to remain at the water's edge, holding one end of the thin retrieval line as a guideline, while Paul continued his descent with scuba gear. Armed with a waterproof video camera as his primary light source, Paul communicated to his brother that he had 2 hours of air and instructed him to seek help if he failed to return within that time. The dive plan seemed to be progressing without any issues as Paul swam deeper into the well, exploring the caverns hidden beneath its surface. However, within just 15 minutes of diving, everything suddenly took a turn for the worse. As Paul descended further into the murky depths of the well, the water grew increasingly cold and siltier. It was then that disaster struck. Paul's safety rope became hopelessly tangled while he was squeezed into one of the narrow tunnels. Panic began to set in as the gravity of the situation slowly dawned on him. He was trapped in freezing, silty water with no escape in sight. In a state of utter panic, Michael tried with all his might to pull his trapped brother out, but to no avail. Realizing that he couldn't move the tangled rope any further, Michael made a quick decision to rush back up the opening of the well to seek help for his younger brother. Without wasting any more time, Michael frantically made his way to the nearby La Crescenta Sheriff's Office to request urgent assistance for Paul. His heart racing with fear and anxiety, he desperately hoped that someone would be able to help his little brother before it was too late. At 1:20 p.m., Michael burst through the doors of the Crescenta Valley Sheriff's Station, pleading for assistance. Sheriff divers responded, and soon rescue personnel from several agencies, using four-wheel drive vehicles to traverse the old, treacherous dirt road, arrived outside the well entrance. First to arrive was the LA County Sheriff's Department, including the Montrose Search and Rescue Team, quickly followed by the LA County Fire Department. They found a chaotic scene. Michael was frantically trying to calm himself down, while family and friends of Paul were waiting anxiously for news. The team quickly assessed the situation and began their rescue attempt. Mark Lonsdale's, a training officer of the LA Sheriff's Dive Team and a nationally known cave and mine rescue diver certified by the NSS Cave Diving Section, main objective was to locate and assess the condition of Paul Hayden. But the conditions inside the well were changing, with silt reducing visibility to almost zero, and the passageways narrow and constricting. About 150 feet beyond the water's edge, they found an old ceiling collapse had partially blocked the tunnel, forming a dam which flooded the area beyond. Several ventilation fans were installed to increase the oxygen level to an acceptable range. Mark entered the sump, occasionally passing through air pockets. About 185 feet into the flooded section, and over 400 feet from the entrance, Lonsdale found Sergeant Hayden's body in a long, partially water-filled passage. His head was underwater, and the regulator was out of his mouth. His scuba tanks were nearly full. Lonsdale fortunately resisted the temptation to move his own regulator. Subsequent samples from the airspace showed only 4% oxygen. Normal air contains 21% oxygen. Breathing air containing 50% oxygen will cause dizziness and headaches, and air containing 9% oxygen will cause unconsciousness. Breathing air with 7% or less oxygen will cause the required oxygen supply to the brain to be immediately shut off, a condition known as asphyxia, a condition Paul unfortunately succumbed to. As Paul struggled to free himself from the tangled rope in the cold, silt-filled water, his panic grew. But then he spotted the air pocket and quickly swam towards it in his increasingly disorientated state, thinking it was his savior. Little did he know that pocket of air would seal his fate. The 1-meter diameter tunnel Paul's body was pulled from was directly below a gas pocket. The shocking discovery was revealed through the recovered footage from Paul's camera. It showed Paul poking his head into the gas pocket and removing his regulator, only to then fall to the bottom of the tunnel and remain motionless. The cause of death was determined to be a lack of oxygen or an excess of some other deadly gas in the air pocket. It's a haunting reminder of the dangers of exploring such environments and the importance of following safety protocols. In fact, it was reported that Hayden had agreed with his para-rescue co-workers prior to the trip that he should never remove his regulator. Yet, in a moment of panic or curiosity, he did, resulting in a small mistake with fatal consequences. While it's important to learn from these tragedies, it's also important to remember that cave diving can be done safely with proper training, equipment, and adherence to safety protocols. Paul's story stands as a reminder to always prioritize safety and caution when exploring the underwater world. Rest in peace, Paul. This has been Gripping Horror. Until next time, dive safe.